Lois brought up another issue that we touched on in a couple different ways, but I want to explore a little bit more in depth with you. And one of the findings through the Dean survey that I mentioned we did in back earlier this year, so we asked for some satisfaction or ratings from deans on their the search process for new department chairs and center directors, and in various different components of the search process, how long it takes, the performance of the search committee, the performance of the search firm, if there was one, overall quality of the candidate pool, high levels of satisfaction in the search process, which I must say was a little surprising to see in this type of way, given what we hear anecdotally so often. But what we found beyond those broad categories is high levels of dissatisfaction with the number of women finalists and the number of ethnic minority finalists in the candidate pool. This surely wouldn't surprise folks here or probably anyone in the audience, but a big disconnect between the overall sense of how well the search goes and these categories of finding women and minorities who not only ascend to the position ultimately, but who end up in that candidate pool. The social psychology has made an immense body of knowledge around the idea of unconscious bias, and it certainly plays out in the search process and in the recruitment process. And my colleague April Carice, who's here today, published an analysis and brief on this topic several months ago. It's available up on the AAMC website if you haven't seen it. In conjunction with the University of Arizona and Ann Wright, who may or may not be here, I don't see her in the lights in my eyes, but she may be here. The University of Arizona has developed an online web-based training module on unconscious bias in the search process and gives some really great tools and tips for search committees about how to mitigate those effects. And we have been able to collaborate with Arizona, and we are adopting that presentation that they developed for their own institution for national use. So sometime in early 2010, we're going to have an online web-based training that any member institution can send their search committee to. Probably will take about 20 minutes or 30 minutes to run through. So it'll be a tool and a resource that's available on this topic. But let me ask you and others in the audience, if how do we make some strides in this area on tapping into greater numbers of women and minorities in these leadership positions. Ron, you mentioned earlier the use of an interim position. Maybe you can speak again a little bit on that.
And frankly, a little controversial as we made that appointment. But someone who was female and Hispanic and had exceptional, I can't underline that enough, interpersonal skills that have really helped us with physician alignment and integration into our network and so forth, and had scholarly credentials in addition, relatively new to our network, so I think part of that was just unfamiliarity, so a bit of a risk, I guess, but gave the individual the chance to win the golden ring and land the chairmanship, and had nothing but praise since that time.
I guess one of the things that I would say is just anecdotal, which is I was extraordinarily fortunate to have a number of people early in my career seen me in a way I did not necessarily see myself. And I think the role that we all have in terms of making sure that we are growing people, and if we see them as leaders, communicating that to them, hopefully so they will stay within our organizations and in leadership. But even if they leave to become a leader, it is a success. I was also struck when I was looking at the University of Kentucky. I had never not lived in Chicago. There were enormous barriers to my making that transition. And Edith Tevelson Locke, because Emory Wilson began doing some of this looking at the search process many years ago, she called me 3 times to encourage me to put in my application. And she was very clear that if I did, I was just one of the candidates and everything like that. But it really, and I don't think of myself as shy or retiring. And when I think that it was important for me to have that at that stage in my development, to have someone go out of their way to encourage it, it's one of the things that I have tried to carry on, but I don't think we can minimize the importance of telling people whom we see as having leadership competencies that we see that in them.
That's a terrific point. This is just such a pipeline issue. I mean, at this meeting, and there's demonstration projects at the meeting of how to increase gender and ethnic and racial diversity. And so Lois then talks about reaching out to people. That's extremely important. I think we also mentioned the search firm's role, and I think that they have an onus in this as well, and instructing and encouraging the search firm to look beyond traditional routes and to reach further out into our community to try to get a broader pool. And then back to the actual search committee composition, it's really important to have the search committee composition look like America. Because if you do have a broad pool of candidates and they don't see their like in the very search committee, their first interaction with your institution, that's going to undo some of their enthusiasm. So it's really important both in terms of the correct composition of the search committee, but also to reduce some of the potential for unconscious bias that you mentioned earlier.